Hello, final dungeon tubers. We're going back to the past. With me, BlueAnkylo. In 2.2, I'm in the future now, talking to you guys in the past, or the other way around. I'm not sure. The time loop is complicated. With Fighter, Samurai Oron, Red Mage, and Engineer Edgar. Nothing has changed between episodes. Last episode, this episode, direct, instant. We're going. There's not much else to talk about. At the end of this episode, if you're interested, I will give my thorough, full review on the two new classes, if you're curious. Until then, let's get rolling. I'm not going to run from everything, like usual, because, you know, I want to show stuff off. I will, however, do a little bit of extra exploration, because, how much do I need to... I'm trying to decide how much I need to be careful with my resources. And I might just exit out and house up after I do this little extra loop. So it's fine. I'm not sure if we can Bane these guys, but Saboteur Red Mage with an Enhancer Sword. Nah, it doesn't work. Should've just attacked. Always be attacking. Yeah, because whenever there's an update, the developer likes to hide sneaky treasure chests around. Like this one! I mean, I didn't know, but sometimes you guess. A 6-barreled firearm. Does that mean it shoots 6 times? Base damage is not good. Well, we'll shoot. We'll try it out. What's the worst it could do? Not kill something? $300 damage. Not bad. I could make it a little better. Here. Let's go make it a little better. I didn't expect to find it anything new that early, but... make it a little bit stronger. Hexagon. More damage. Hit does nothing. Crit doesn't do anything, so all you can do is damage. You could give it, like, strong against a certain enemy. Like, if I give it fire, crystal, it would do more damage against some of the enemies we fight. But this will be the most general purpose utility. And because it's an auto crit, it sort of counts doubled. Every shot is doing double damage thanks to crits. And with 6 hits, you could think of that 3 damage as 6 hits, and the 3 would be 6. Or 6 to 12, kind of in the range. Plus 6 to 12 damage-ish. Times 6. So that one fire crystal... maybe average of extra 50 damage? Something like that? I'm not sure if my math is perfect. But that's the theory. The Ankylo theory. So we'll shoot some things for a little bit. I know I haven't used guns very much, so... if I find any more guns, I'll try to test them out. Cold, ice cold, baby. 368, 5 hits. We did miss one. You know, if we can do 400 damage ignoring armor, that's not bad. It's more than the Red Mage is doing. On a regular attack, at least. We're never going to keep up with fighters and samurais, but hey, it's enough to one-shot a green dragon. It's a lot of green dragons. Not always, though. This is in the... we should maybe reset. The amount of HP we just lost is like, maybe we should start over again. Phantom has a lot of armor, actually. Never mind. Hey, we finally get some money. Now we can craft all of our best items. Alright, I know this is a little bit lame, but I'm gonna go back to the end. The double large gas dragon pack, just spamming poison, basically non-elemental breath attacks. I guess it is poison element, technically. I forget. But they obviously do too much damage, and we don't have a lot of healing in this group, you know? So we'll just reset that one out. I'm specifically trying not to run from everything, but... that was at least 4 heal potions on the first turn. Let's try to do a little better. Same encounter exactly. Same start exactly. Hilarious. I could just be trying to run. That is the default. You can't run from the Gasties, but you can run from Frost Dragons at least. Yeah, that shouldn't work. Okay, we can probably just auto-battle this. The mages don't have a lot of hit points. The fighter doesn't really do much. If you're playing Pokemon, capturing one of those fighters is a good choice. Probably the favorite thing I ever captured when I was doing Beastmaster. I mean, it's not game-breaking, but it has Cure 4 and Wall. Alright. Phantom. You know, the fighter is actually resistant to Time Elemental. That's a Time Elemental spell. Good job, planning. Can't run from Zombie Ds, but they're not nearly as bad as Gasties. The Stinky Dragons are the worst, generally. I will check these. I think this is unrunnable. We'll spend... Noise. Actually, the noise might have been the way to play the gas dragons, too. Can't poison me if you're confused. We do have a lot of resources. I don't need to be super stingy. It's just in my nature to hold off and never use anything. If only we had that 4th ribbon. I do believe I remember reading that Chimera's are actually weak to water. Not weak enough, though. I suppose if you make the single target Super Soaker, that might be enough to kill one. I don't know. I can't think of much else that you would bring Water Elemental for. You know, Rock Golems and a couple other enemies that are weak to water, but... I mean, technically, we can change it every floor. That is one thing that I'm not always giving the engineer credit for, is every single floor of the final dungeon, you kind of know the kind of enemies you're going to fight, because they're themed elementals for most floors. So you could very much change which tools you have access to and come in with 9 of every tool you want. It's probably not necessary, not that important, but actually, I have a different plan for healing here. Hold on. Well, this is the Aqua Blaster fight. So before I... Of course the turn order is so bad that I should have just attacked. Every freaking time, man. What was I gonna say? I don't know, I lost track. Right, my healing plans. I can spam heal potions, but I did specifically make a tool to help with the final dungeon healing. I will check this room as well. Well, seeing as we know we can't easily kill them, let's use the Medic Crossbow! I think this is more efficient than heal potions by a small amount. I wonder if the engineer always has, like, bad turn order. Like, it seems like he does very frequently go last. No, not this time. So it's not much better than a heal staff. And it does cost me... Like, I don't really want to craft these in the dungeon because it costs me 4 heal potions. So it has to be more efficient than 4 heal potions or else it's absolutely garbage. I don't know. Mute. Instantly kill. Instantly kill. Everyone had a way to kill the Lich or stop it from nuking us. Bam. Although we don't have our hammer equipped. I gotta remember, because I've got gun mode for a little bit longer, our tool usages are a little bit... Maybe that's why our water gun wasn't killing everything. That is... I mean, it's a choice. I almost wish... I kind of think the tool potency effect of the Master Hammer maybe should be just something you get when you're promoted as a trait or something. Maybe... Because then you could use guns and tools and not have to switch around as much. Maybe the hammer could still give you... Well, I don't think the tools should be consumable at all. But if you insist on them be consumable, then let the hammer... Like, the novice hammer, I think, was like 50% chance to consume a use. Let the master hammer be like, never consume a use. And just give the passive potency boost just for being an engineer. Alright, this is... technically an upgrade if I bothered to leave the dungeon and come back. What are the chances of me getting all the way to the massa and exiting out for fun? No, I can do that later if I want to. If I want the optimal gear setup, I can get the Protect Cloak, give it to Edgar, move over some water ore. If I could augment mid-dungeon, that'd be cool. If you guys see, maybe that's something, I think you should be able to augment, anywhere. Maybe you could just add anvils in every town, or even in some dungeons. The volcano has fire giants. They're known crafters, in D&D lore at least. Certainly the Tiamat's place could have an old crafting workbench or something. Maybe the mermaids in the sea shrine. I think there might be ways to put some anvils around the map so that you can augment without having to go all the way back to Dwarf Cave. And having the mid-dungeon would be... I kind of think you should just be able to do it all the time, but I could see certain locations. Unfortunately, we can't dual-wield katanas. It would be so cool. But... Anyway, I'm just looking for any hidden items, doing a full clear for funsies, basically. I see the fighter's been taking some damage, too. That's sad. This is definitely why, if you're doing like a full clear, you want to consider, exiting out after you get the massa, because you might run out of heal potions before you get to the final boss. But in theory, we can pretty much trivialize these fights. So let's see how she goes. Hold works pretty well on carry, and I still haven't used stun. Buzzsaw. We took a bunch of damage, and she's dead. Well, it's just a matter of turn order. She went first, so we took some hits. And she could have killed the Red Wizard and ruined our run. But that's just a matter of turn order. The Kraken has a chance to do the same thing. Alright, check these rooms. I'm just looking for any secret stuff. That's unrunnable. Ice 3. You know what? Blink Bulb. Actually, the Confusion is probably better, but... yeah, Ice 2's not quite enough to kill them. It's buffed up a lot, but... oh yeah, we're not getting double shadows anymore, yeah. I think I'm going to give up on the gun, because I kind of got used to the tools being effective. Now, the gun is doing, like, decent damage, don't get me wrong. It's not bad. That was doing more damage than I expected, definitely. But I've invested so much time and energy into these dang tools. We gotta get something out of them. I mean, confusion on a big group like... I mean, you could run away as well, of course, but... if we just had good turn order, Oh well. Lightning Tube mostly got the job. Oh, I forgot to show you that tome. There was a reference there. Yeah, the ice didn't do anything. Let's try noise this time. The water fights are always annoying because you can't run from them, and they do a lot of damage. So this is one of those like HP heal potion kind of sucking battles. But the Noise Blaster I think is pretty efficient here. Not the most expensive item, and it at least gets you a few less attacks in. Saves you some heal potions, I think. Alright, so fun time, right? I mean, you know, it's just it comes down to turn order, really. There's not much else we can do. You could try to cover the red mage just so that we don't get the one person with the life spell killed. I don't know if that... I don't think that has... Cover really should have priority if it doesn't, because it would like that a lot. And obviously if you slow it or paralyze it, it's done. So we'll go for slow, because this is the main thing would be slowed. And similarly, confusion would do the job too. So this is one where if you switched to the single target confuse tool that makes it deal extra damage to itself, that would be pretty funny. Okay, we got the slow, we're fine. No confuse though, that's okay. So we've already won. It only does one hit now, which means nothing to worry about. Yeah, Saboteur on the red mage works pretty well. Okay, well, we're almost done. Unless I'm missing something. Ooh, juicy XP. A bit spicy. I wonder what the odds are of just baning them out or something. I should also... I keep forgetting to get my level 8 slots. We should get those ready. I'll just go for Noise Blaster, I think. These guys do a little bit too much damage. 2 out of 3, I'll take it. Use some more medic crossbows while we're just waiting around here. It's not free healing, but it's close. Another big fight, sure. Why not? I mean, they're likely to cast anti-fire. We could just go for a random curse, see what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Noise Blaster's working pretty well, though. Darkness, poison, paralyze, poison. Yeah, curse spell's pretty bad. I don't know. Some people were trying to convince me it was good in the comments one time. Random. You get darkness and poison way too often, I gotta say. Sure, it's funny to poison an undead, but... I gotta drop something... I can buy it back if I change my mind, as long as you don't deconstruct it. So, goodbye gun, I guess. Alright, here we go. So, the big boy. It has a weapon skill. Awesome. Non-elemental instant KO on all foes. I mean, it is the ultimate sword. Non-elemental death. On everything. I still think it's very rare you'll have time to charge it up and then use it on a big group, as is the traditional problem with charge type mechanics, but non-elemental death, yeah, that tends to work. It's not a lot to resist that. Literally chaos and some summoner bosses. Also, we're going from 74 and 5 attacks. Yes, we're definitely putting it on the person that gets an extra 23 damage from equipping it with 2 hands. To 104. We are, I think 160 is another swing. So 3 levels. Level 35 would be whatever, is that 6 attacks? 32s to 64, 96, 128. Sorry, I'm not counting right. 32. I've got my hand. I'm using my fingers. 32, 64, 96, 128, 160. 5 attacks, I think. Whatever. It doesn't matter. One more attack at 160. And double that if hasted. And the damage is over 100. Whew. Well, I did say I like the base attack on this this bad boy. Let's see what it looks like. No more crits. Say goodbye to the crazy crit weapon, but we don't need crits where we're going. That means how many swings are we getting? I feel like at some point we get enough attacks that we recharge to max TP like instantly, right? Those vampires still manage to punch through our armor. It's kind of annoying. These fights on New Game Plus are relatively brutal. This last random encounter floor of the dungeon, if you're not careful, you can very much run out of healing on this place. And on New Game Plus, it's definitely a lot worse. Big packs of hard-hitting enemies that hit twice as hard. Now, this is definitely where on New Game Plus you're going to get more value out of these disabling kind of abilities. I mean, we're still dealing enough damage to one-shot them even with double HP, I think. So it's still better to kill them like that. But, no, we're only getting 5 hits, so it must be 6 hits at 160. That's crazy. 6 hits at a base over 100 damage. That's 600 to 1200. Like that averages 900 with 0 critical hits. And if you haste or fast, it's double that, so you're averaging like 1800 damage. And that's before absorb. Of course, enemy absorb counts, but all right, how do we want to brutalize Tiamat? If I get a turn, Bane, and Buzzsaw? I'll go for the confusion. It's kind of funny. Confused. Be confused. Hit yourself. You should hit yourself. 400 damage, poison smoke. Yeah. Unfortunately, anything that can be killed by Bane is probably with a Saboteur. With the high intelligent enhanced sword plus Saboteur, I think anything susceptible to Bane is dead, basically. I wouldn't mind saving before those fights. It'd actually be kind of cool if there was like an arena where you could just refight any boss to try out different strategies, honestly. It wouldn't be too hard to set up, probably. A special room in the post-game or something, or some menu where you can just walk through a big room and just see a sprite of each of the bosses, and you can just fight them infinitely if you want, just to try out different strategies. That'd be kind of fun. Alright, well, here we go. Is there anything I would change for equipment? I mean, I could put the Massa on the Knight and equip the Katana again, but if I'm really going max damage, you put the Saber on the Ninja, or the Samurai. Samurai and Ninja, I'm going to mix it up a bit, but I don't think it really matters. Now, Chaos is specifically resistant. We've learned this over the course of our adventures. Specifically, innately resists... Wait, it doesn't resist KO? You gotta be kidding me. Bind, Doom, Confuse, Petrify, Silence. Well, that's not good for Chaos. That's in fact very bad for him. Evade special attacks is kind of funny. I don't know what I want to do. I don't think the fight's going to be anything challenging at all, so we'll just do a couple turns of something. I don't know. What do I even want to do to Chaos? I'll curse him. I curse you. I'll summon my Warmack. Nice. He's poisoned. Useless. defense up some more. Use another useless skill, like, I guess we have to use a limit. I need to attack once. I need to charge up. What did I do last time? I don't even remember. I cursed him and it was useless. Oh, I was going to put anti-rub on. That's right, because the fighter doesn't have status or earth protection. That was one of my plans, yeah. Should I turn into a Magitech guy? I don't know. I can't use my cool stuff here. Sorry. I kind of wish I had a way of checking without going all the way like this. He is officially immune to confusion, though. You can't silence or confuse him. Only paralyze, of course. Oh, Blink Bulb was one of the things I meant to do. I like that our War Mech did 1 damage. Alright, we should have full wall effect on everyone, basically. I've used 2 defenses, I think. 1 more, and we're immune to physicals on the fighter. We are at max TP here. I mean, maybe it won't work on their first try, right? So we'll do that. And sure want to I kind of, well, how do you want to do this? Maybe we can paralyze him. That would be funny. He does resist status. It's not very likely to hit, I don't think. All right, we'll go Magic. Yeah, we didn't get the hold through. I didn't really expect it. The fighter is now max ruse for sure. We can also start power gloving up in case somehow everyone else dies. Can he survive 4 oblivions? It's silly. But hey, I'm trying to show off the new guys. I'm not trying to win via the classic haste plus temper strats, right? We've done that enough. Probably. For a while, at least. I'll still try to paralyze him, because that would be funny. We'll do some healing. Yeah, I got a new tank here in town. Didn't get him, that's okay. Decent heal. Dead on the first one. Insta-killed by the masses' skill. Well, I guess they should have given Chaos immunity to KO if they didn't want me to do that. I mean, that's a new one. I've never killed him with non-elemental KO, I guess. So there it is. Cool. Alright, let's reset. I wish I could save in front of Chaos and show all the ways we can brutalize him with this party, but clearly killing him is not the problem. So the reference I was talking about earlier a couple times is the tombstone now says Sid. 1987 to 2020. I don't know if that's a person. The years were definitely different in the original game. It used to say Here Lies Erdrick, but I think every ROM hack I've played has changed it. And maybe, I'm not sure if this is true, but maybe Renaissance changes this every update, you know? Because Sid is obviously the reference, and there was one of the robots mentioned, the original master. This is clearly the Sid storyline that gets us into our engineer, which is cool. But I don't know if the date means anything. 87 to 2020? Sounds like someone's younger brother from my age. R.I.P. either way. So, anyway, let's wrap up. Wow, that was a short episode. I'll probably spend a fair amount of time here. I'm gonna talk about the new 2 classes, and I'm gonna compare them to my tier list a little bit, if you guys remember my Christmas tier list in the old version, and just kind of talk about my first impressions on my first playthrough, because I think I've got enough experience now that I can give a relatively informed opinion. And as always, I know I tend to, you know, most people in the comments you're cool. Try not to be too critical on me here, right? You know, I'm just saying my opinion. It's my opinion. I might disagree with you, and we can have a discussion about it in the comments, but let's not do the backseat gaming and the hardcore you're wrong stuff, right? Like, that's not going to get us anywhere. So, first initial opinion, Ronin into Samurai, very strong, high-tier martial. I think legitimately tied or just behind the Warrior Paladin in Renaissance. Now, because we had the Engineer, I'm trying to split the crafting from the Engineer, which changes like the gearing a little bit. I'm trying not to factor that in, of course, because that's for him. But the Ronin on his own doesn't have access to crafted weapons and armor. So the Ronin gets good weapons. The weapon selection is, I would say, about equivalent to a fighter/warrior. And then as a promotion, same kind of thing. It's not identical, and I think there are different highs and lows depending on which dungeon you're in. Sometimes it's a little better, sometimes a little bit worse, which is fine. But overall, I think it's very, very similar damage output. You know, and I mean, I gave him the Massa. Anyone with a Massa is crazy OP, but it is... he does happen to get a very powerful... I don't have it here anymore, but because we reset. But he does happen to get a very powerful final attack, which seems to kill the boss in one hit. Cool. But we're not worried about that too much. The point is, the Ronin consistently has top-tier fight damage via good spears, good katana, swords, things, and technically he has bows and daggers, but whatever, you know, doesn't matter. But the spears and swords are good. He's got the 3% hit growth. His strength is a little lower than the fighters, but not enough to make a significant difference. At level 31, the way the random numbers went for me, he's 10 strength behind, which is 5 damage. Now, how much of a difference does that make? It depends on enemy absorb and number of hits and crits and stuff. But I think because he has access to the double hand skill, this does make him particularly good with swords. It means the spears are going to be a little bit weaker, but this does drop his defense a little bit to do... I think double hand gives him a bit more damage than the fighter in what I observed, whereas if you don't use double hand and you equip a shield, that keeps him more in par, in balance with the fighter's defense. So you have a choice between maybe doing the most average martial damage of any character for fight, just by a slight margin, or kind of average, maybe a little bit behind the fighter, but also be almost as defensive as a fighter. The main thing is he can't equip iron armor or silver armor, or knight's armor, I don't think. So until you get promoted to samurai, he is going to fall a little bit behind in defense, normally, when the fighter gets the ice armor and stuff like that. So the fighter is still the best armor and weapons in general. But I think the Ronin, in terms of fighting, defending, and attacking, is maybe just a tiny little bit weaker, but very close, and at certain points of the game, better. Just on average, I think, a little bit behind. And honestly, the final tweak is actually the only major difference is he gets 2 M defense per level, the fighter gets 3. And I have to give it to the fighter. That's just a little bit less likely to get stun touched, poison, or, well, poison doesn't really matter, but death touch, stun touch, those are the worst ones. Squinted, tranced, like all that stuff. It's not a huge difference, but right now, the fighter has effectively 30 levels of 3 magic defense growth, and we have 30 levels of 2 magic defense growth. So not counting armor and original base starting stats, the fighter has 30 more M defense via level ups. And that's not nothing. That's definitely enough to take half damage from some spells, avoid a couple effects. It could be the difference that keeps you alive. One thing to keep in mind, his armor, or his HP, is very similar to the fighter's. His vitality is a little bit lower. At the moment, he has more HP, although I think most of the time the fighter had more HP than the samurai. That little boost was the 50. Also, I didn't really factor it in, but he was doing an extra 15% damage from the Genji glove in that last dungeon today. So that might have been he took more and dealt a little bit more, which is one of the reasons why him with the Massa was the best play. I think with this, plus some tempering and fasting, might be in contention for the highest single physical attack you can do, maybe. But there are some other pretty crazy builds. A level 50 black belt is still insane. But you can't temper or power glove them is the thing. I would say their basic utility in terms of fighting, weapons, and armor is basically fighter tier, which is already like the best outside of a time mage in my opinion. So that's pretty good. Everything else is kind of extra. So although I'm going to be a little bit critical on phase 2, the initial pass is this is an amazing class. And you can completely ignore the skills, the weapon skills, and it's fine. Like, he's still very, very strong. But let's talk about his skills. Re-equip, I didn't use ever. But it's cool. I think it's a nice effect. It's not likely to be a difference maker most of the time. But situationally, you could equip different weapons that have effectiveness against different enemies. Unfortunately, I don't think he can equip the standard weapons that have weapon family advantages. I don't think he can equip the rune sword, the were sword, the dragon sword. So you can't just throw those to him normally and be like, oh, surprise, it's a red dragon that ambushed us. Switch over to the dragon sword, do some bonus damage. In practice, you need an engineer to give him those, and that's not what he can do in on his own. So it's more likely that you're switching between a sword or a spear to use skills. But there are some late game spears and stuff with elements on and stuff. So you can have like I don't know, I can't remember his full list of weapons he could equip. But not counting crafted, augmented stuff. There's definitely some family advantages or some elemental advantages you can use. And being able to re-equip for that, it's a small bonus, but I say this is like a positive skill with no downside that's totally fair. It just doesn't make a huge difference. But it is nice. Like, this is a nice to have. No big deal. Weapon skills I'll talk about in the final section for Samurai. But it's complicated. We'll get to that in a bit. Sekinoki. So these are there's a bunch of skills. There's 6 of them that you learn via little mini-bosses playing the game. I like that idea, conceptually. You don't start with them. You kind of gain them. They're all in the early game. You get one in the first dungeon behind Chaos. You get one in the Marsh Cave. You get one in the Titan's Tunnel. You get one in the Earth Cave. You get one in the Volcano. You get one in the Ice Cave. So you get them in the first half of the game, which is great. I've talked before about how promotion lock skills are kind of annoying for a lot of classes that should really just start with stuff. The Samurai, this is a way of doing it that I think is better than having everything be promotion locked. Maybe you don't want it at the level 1 when you're starting the game. But if you get something in Garland's little dungeon, something in Marsh, you've got 6 skills. They're not crazy good. In fact, some of them are probably bad. But at least you get them before promotion. You get them early enough in the game that you can use them if you want. And I think that is definitely a plus. So first up, design decision, unlockable mini-bosses for skills early on, with a little bit of choice on which one you pick early. 100%, I love that mechanic. Very good. Now, the skills themselves are kind of debatably useful. Sekinoki is only useful if you want to set up a mega skill chain. It's probably almost never an efficient use of your turn. You're doing nothing to make your next turn better if you have the right skills, and it doesn't just insta-kill the enemy anyway. It's a charge style skill, and I think its utility is very, very low. Not 0, but basically near useless. But that's fine, it's free, it doesn't cost you anything. You can just have it and ignore it. It's fine. Third Eye is a little better. I think, especially on like a solo run, or if your Samurai is your tank, like your top slot character, this might be better. I do believe that it has priority, so it goes first, which is good. And I think it's not a single round and then it's over. I think the way I'm reading this, and from the couple times I used it, it's like it gives yourself the blink effect, and the blink effect lasts until something attacks you. And then you auto-dodge it, and you get fatigued. But the fatigue doesn't really matter. It just means you can't use the skill again for a little bit. For one turn. It's not amazing, because playing defensive is rarely the right meta strategy, like metagaming. It's not the meta, I would say. But I can think of a few times where this could be good. And especially if you're fighting challenge bosses like Gilgamesh, the samurai boss, Zerilon, maybe the summoner bosses, some of them. That's the kind of thing where some of the super bosses, this kind of thing could have some utility. But generally speaking, I would also say in New Game Plus, Kraken hits so hard. But you'd kind of get into a cycle where you'd use this, dodge an attack, and then you couldn't use it on the next turn, and you're right back to where you started. So it doesn't net you a lot of momentum in the battle, at least not in a solo battle. If you have other allies, they can combo around it. But it doesn't force the enemy to attack you, and I think that's the downside of this one. There's a time magic spell that forces the enemy to target a certain person. So, like, as always, the Time Mage combos and makes everything better, of course. That's fine. But on his own, he can't do that. So, because you could use Third Eye against the Kraken and be in the top slot, 50% of the time, the first attack, you dodge. That gives your party a chance to set up, which is okay. But maybe you should just attack and kill them, right? But it does have priority, and maybe he attacks the White Mage and kills them on the first turn anyway. This doesn't help you. Which is usually what you're worried about. If you're trying to be careful, you don't want your life caster to get smacked by the Kraken, and this doesn't do anything to help them. So, this I say is basically worthless. This is like worthless +2. It's better, but mostly not very helpful. At least in my opinion. Maybe I'm overlooking something. Again, leave a comment if you can think of a scenario where this is amazing, and I will think about it. I might not agree with you, but I will think about it. Last skill. Another one of the unlockables. You gain a little tiny fraction of TP. 25 is basically nothing. You gain more TP for a couple turns. I think this is also mostly garbage. Think about it this way. If you attack and you get 50 per hit. So in the early game, 50, maybe 100 TP per attack. In the later game, 200 to 300 TP per attack. Depending on how high a level you want to grind to. You still have a limit of 300 as a Ronin and 400 as a Samurai. So, if you normally get 200 TP from attacking, you don't keep the overflow. So you're doing nothing, and then next turn you're going to max. If you had just attacked on turn 1, you might be pretty close to max already, and then on turn 2, you'd be using your skill, earlier. like one round quicker. So, I do think mostly this is trash. I'm not sure how to fix it. It's maybe shouldn't cost a turn. Like, maybe it has like a fatigue, like, it's an instant skill you can just activate, and then you can only use it once per battle, or it's got a fatigue cost or something. Or something. I kind of like the idea of gaining TP quicker, but I kind of think the whole TP system isn't quite working. So, I'm not valuing TP generation very high, or TP reductions, because I don't think it is a very good system. And even though these are sort of designed to buff it a little bit, I think they make it worse because you're spending a turn to not kill stuff. So, okay. 3 pretty bad skills. From basically a waste of a turn to maybe okay. The world thing, this is just how you unlock the skills, that's fine. Bujutsu is just giving you a little bit of information. Bows, as always, are trash, and although you get double TP, that's only relevant until you hit 32% attack and get 2 attacks with a sword. Because at 2 attacks with a sword, you get 100 TP per attack, which is the same as bows will ever get forever. So if you want to do bow main, you will never get more than 100 per attack, which is dumb, and you're going to do less damage than attacking 2 or 3 times, or 4 times, or 5 times. And once you're attacking 4 times, you're getting 200 TP per sword attack, or spear attack, or whatever, or dagger attack, whatever, all the other good weapons, whereas the bow is stuck at 100 forever. Not good. Starts at 300 cap, promotions to 400 cap, that's fine, it doesn't really change anything. This was one of the skills we unlocked in the later section. I think this is the right idea to start with TP at the beginning of a fight. It doesn't actually mean you always start with 100. It means if the last fight you had 100, then the next time you have it. So if you're using skills regularly, this does not mean you always have 100. It just means maybe every second fight you have 100, or whatever excess from the last one. I kind of think this should change to just start with 100 always, just to be simpler. It's kind of consistent with how the dance bravery system works. And honestly, the dancer had its scale on their levels. So every 5 levels, I think, they started with 5 or something more bravery at the beginning of battle. I kind of think the TP system needs something like that, where you just start with a set amount, maybe 100, or maybe at level 1 you start with 50 or something. But, maybe. But you need to be able to use these skills on turn 1 or 2. Otherwise, the battle's over, right? So, this is the kind of thing that is the right idea, but I don't think it's enough. It's too little to make the TP system strong. But it's definitely, as a passive, it's definitely better than these. I just don't think it's quite enough. This one is definitely mandatory. This is so important that I don't know why you don't just start with it. Because if you change equipment, it basically means you can't use a different weapon skill in combat. I thought that was one of my initial terrible impressions. Like, well, what's the point of re-equipping if you can't even charge up your TP, switch to a weapon, and use its skill? But you can get this before you fight Chaos. You could get this at level 1 if you want it. Assuming you can beat one little baby Ronin up. Like level 2 or 3 for sure. So you can basically start with this if you want. You get this in either the first dungeon or the Marsh Cave, whichever one you want. Basically mandatory for the class, yes. If you want to use the TP system, this is necessary. And then Double Hand is a great skill. Another one, this is the other one for the level 1, the early skills are really, really good. The second and third round of skills are much more debatable. But like these are both incredibly useful. I think I talked about Double Hand already for the weapons, but the idea of either focusing on offensive or defensive with a shield or a knot sword, perfectly good skill. I love that kind of decision making, and it makes the class better with no downside other than you get to choose. You don't have to use it. If you want to equip a shield, use a shield. It's fine. If you want to have a sword and a shield, go for it. But if you want to do max damage, take that shield off and put a boot on if you've got an engineer. I think it's obviously very good. Zanshin, this is, at least it's passive. I think this is almost useless. I did a little bit of reading up to try to see if I understood it correctly. I believe it's not, let's say you get 4 attacks. It does not mean if one of the 4 attacks misses, it gets re-rolled, which is kind of what I thought at first. It means if you miss all of your attacks, however many you have, with a bow, you miss your 1 attack. If it's a sword, you miss your 5 attacks, which is very, very unlikely, by the way. You have a 30% chance to just attack again. It's like you pick the fight command again. It only would ever matter against something with like max evasion, in which case it doesn't matter because you're gonna miss, and then even if you roll a 30% chance to attack a second time, you're just gonna miss again. So really the only situation this would work is if you're fighting someone with a consumable evade charge like Blink, which is basically the Fenrir boss if you have a summoner on the team. And this just means about 1 in 3 times, if you attack someone with Blink, you will burn through their first Blink charge and then attack them a second time. But that's only 30% chance. It should be like 100%, honestly. It's so niche. There's so rarely a situation where that will ever come up that why would it be, like, most of the time, 70% of the time, it does nothing if you miss. How often do you miss? Almost never. So those rare occasions where you miss, most of the time it does nothing. I don't think in a normal run you will ever see this ability proc. Unless you have a summoner and you're fighting Fenrir and you have Zanshin before you fight Fenrir. And Fenrir's in the waterfall, I think. So it's pretty... No, Fenrir was in... was it Gaia? Was it airship locked, I think? Yeah, the waterfall was Odin. I always forget the summoners because whatever. But wherever Fenrir is, I forget. The Blink boss. This would help with that fight. I can't really think... Maybe there's a samurai fight that has... probably one of the samurais can use third eye, or third eye. But if you have multiple people attacking, if someone else attacks him before the samurai attacks him, he'll burn the Blink before the samurai attacks, which again means it doesn't matter. So I basically, I don't think this will ever... Realistically, it'll never come up. So, worth nothing. So, okay, of the 6 skills, 2 are really good, 3 are mostly worthless, and 1 is very, very niche, in my opinion. So, not great, but you get them early. I think the problem I have is with the TP, and we're about ready to talk about the techniques. I should mention the limits. They don't really matter. I don't value the limits very highly. Once per trip to the inn, as always. I technically use this against Chaos, but it didn't matter because the first skill killed him. I've never really come up with a reason to do multiple skill chains because you generally kill stuff immediately. So if you're in a situation where you can't just kill something and you want to charge up 2, 3, 4 turns to unload the crazy anime-style multi-elemental ninjutsu cool attack, you might just kill him on the first attack and then it doesn't matter, even though you did all this build-up. So it's a really cool conceptual idea to build up this massive samurai. It's very what's it, Demon Slayer style, right? It's like you're doing your deep breathing exercises. You got your sword in the sheath. You're charging up, and then you unload this multi combo. It sounds awesome, but practically speaking, it never happens. So, not impressed. And then Yagasumi, I think this is the only class that has 2 limits. It's still only, I think you only get to pick one per in wrist. I guess if you've got a time mage, you can just use them every fight or something. Sure. I don't consider a time mage a viable companion because it breaks the game too much. I can't really talk about time mage combos without being like, yeah, of course it's easy. You have a time mage. Nothing really matters anymore. But if you do kill the optional boss, you get a skill that basically gives you auto evade for 3 turns. The duration is nice. A lot of times I'm like, oh, 1 turn, lame. 3 turns with priority. This goes first. That's not terrible. It's a kind of passive TP generator if you know you're fighting enemies with skills. It's pretty limited, only skills, and you only get it at the end of the samurai's run, so it would work on like the Ronin or the samurai boss, but you don't get it until after that. It's kind of like how the Rune Knight gets the most useful Spellblade attack and enchant after it no longer matters because you've beat the game, basically. It's kind of that situation here. When would you use this, given that you need 200,000+ gold and an airship? I'm really struggling to think of when I want the samurai to dodge 3 enemy skills. On a solo run, there might be a couple situations as usual. In a group, very unlikely that this ever matters. And it doesn't protect the group either. See, that's the kind of thing for a limit. I think it needs to be better given how niche these are. If it is like, maybe it is. I don't know technically, but I'm assuming it's just single target. It just makes you dodge. But if this protected the whole group from enemy skills for 3 turns, once per dungeon, yeah, I'd say that'd be pretty good for a limit. I would take that, because you'd have it for Tiamat. You could dodge Thunder and Blizzard and whatever else, Blaze or whatever she's got. And it would save you some damage. You could use it against Chaos, maybe. You could use it against... There's not a lot of enemies with a lot of skills. Maybe you got a nasty Sorcerer pack and you dodge a couple trances or something. Yeah, I kind of think it should maybe be better. I think that's kind of my thing with limits. If you're going to limit them to once per dungeon, once per in trip, then I really think they need to be flashier. And neither of these are quite impressive enough. Anyway, the final thing... and I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but weapon skills. I have to first acknowledge that a ridiculous amount of work went into this. Obviously, very clearly. I don't think there's any duplicate skills. There are more JRPGs and Final Fantasy games that are lazier in mechanical implementations of systems than the Renaissance developer is. So, as much as I'm going to be a little critical here on the final outcome and utility and balance, I acknowledge that there was more energy and effort put into this than real paid developers put into their JRPGs. Most games would have taken the easy way out, and Swords would have had 3 or 4 skills spears would have had 3 or 4 skills, if more than one even. And it, like, maybe there'd be like 2. And maybe the ultimate weapon's got a unique one if you're lucky. But the fact that I think every equipable samurai weapon, and that's most daggers, katanas, spears, and bows, like a ton of weapons, each have a unique skill, it's crazy. And they are somewhat balanced. The early game ones are weaker than the late game ones. In theory, some of the stronger base stat weapons have weaker skills, and the weaker base stat weapons have stronger skills. Like, I'm sure a tremendous amount of thought, energy, and programming went into this. However, the system of generating TP over multiple turns, and then saving it up to do chains, I think it falls apart in practice. And I don't have a fix in mind off the top of my head. Just the way Final Fantasy 1, the battle mechanics work, it's really hard for me to find a way for this to work. I kind of think I would prefer... Because if you imagine, most of the time the Ronin or Samurai can attack one creature and kill it, because it's approximately fighter tier in power. Maybe the skills need to work every turn, so you don't have to charge them up. And if you want to do a chain altogether, it has to be better than the number of turns it takes to charge it up, right? And considerably better. This was the problem with Summoner, where you just want to kill things on turn 1, or at least some of them, rather than all of them on turn 2. If I want to use this katana skill, Chiri Jiraden, whatever it's called, 160 fire damage to all foes. It's good. That's almost a nuke. A nuke is 200 base, non-elemental. If the enemies are weak to fire, theoretically you're actually using this against something weak against it. That's a base 240, maybe with your intelligence boosting, maybe with bluff or other bonuses boosting it. That's a good amount of damage. There's nothing wrong with your ultimate weapons doing nuke tier damage to all enemies. That's sweet. But you can't do it on turn 1. You can do it on turn 2, but how many enemies are left? Like, this is AoE. So you want to use this when there's more than one enemy, right? So let's say you're fighting, I don't know, 6 or 7 vampires. They're weak to fire. This sounds awesome. Perfect. Turn 1, you can't use it, so you attack, because that's the default. You kill one, maybe one of your party members kills one, maybe you've got a black mage, they cast fire 2 because they're being conservative. They don't want to waste their good spells. You're trying to conserve your resources. Fire 2 doesn't guaranteed kill a vampire, but it's probably 50-50. Let's say we're on New Game Plus, so you can't do that. But the fighter, like, let's say we start with 6 vampires. The samurai definitely kills one. The dragoon or the fighter kills one, or whoever. And then the rest of the party is, like, chip damage. Maybe they kill one more. But you can definitely say 2 or 3 are dead on turn 1. That's half the party dead. Then on turn 2, you're like, okay, I'm going to access this cool skill. I'm going to definitely kill the rest of the vampires. But this doesn't have priority. The fighter kills another one. Maybe the black mage casts fire 2 for the second time. They're all dead. You get nothing. Or there's one left, you use the skill, and you might as well just attack. Now, if you're lucky, it goes first, and you might kill 3. But it doesn't change the outcome of the battle by a significant margin, because if you went first, you would have just killed 1 anyway. Now there's 2 left, the fighter kills 1, and then the fight's over, kind of thing. So, this is what I mean. As long as you can just kill stuff 1 at a time, which they definitely can, easily. Even on New Game Plus, I'm very confident a averagely leveled, because we be higher level on New Game Plus, you get double the experience. I think it's very likely that in general, it's better to just attack twice than to attack and then use a skill. And that fundamentally means the skills, or the attack once and use a technique, to be clear on the language here. That, like, fundamentally means using a skill to decrease the cost of a technique, or not attack for a turn to do a better technique, or try to save up enough TP to do 2 or 3 skills at once. It's just always the worst option for me. Like, really, almost always. It's very hard for me to come up with a scenario where it's better to save up for a skill than to just attack. And I played the whole game through with a pretty strong party, but again, most parties are strong. That's unless you're bringing a bunch of white mages. Unless you're only bringing support characters, most characters can kill stuff. That's how the game works, you know. Whether you're using magic or physical damage, it's just the nature. So I haven't really experimented with them. There's a lot of different effects. Some of these skills are certainly better than others, but even the best ones, I don't think are... The way the TP system is designed, it doesn't quite work well enough for me to value it. So for me, it's basically forgettable. The fact that you can re-equip and change to a Holy Spear to kill the Lich if you want, that's cool. But you can probably just kill him with your katana anyway, right? You know, or whatever you've got. And because of the base mechanics of TP generation, the skills that support it don't really matter to me. So, what would I suggest? I think the Samurai is strong enough on its own. It doesn't need a huge buff or anything. It's not like the Summoner or the Spellblade that I'm like, nah, they need a little bit of help. They are underpowered. They're not close enough to the average power of a Renaissance job. The Ronin Samurai is already very good. Maybe nearly top tier already. But if you want the techniques to be competitive with just attacking, they kind of need to come faster or provide alternative effects. So AoE is good, like elemental damage, but you need to be able to do it like on turn 1. And I know you don't want to step on like a black mage's shoes. You don't want to be like, well, now I have infinite fire 3 for free. Well, that's not fair to the black mage, right? Because now we've got a high armor, high physical attack, good HP, and can just cast fire 3 for free without using a spell. Like, that's not what I mean either. I don't know how to fix that. I think there has to be a way of using techniques quicker, and maybe they don't do as much damage. Like, maybe it's not literal damage, but they're focused more on debilitating or buffing your friends. Something that a fighter can't do normally, but you can use for utility on weird scenarios where you don't want to just attack. You want to buff up the party with Invisible 2. Like any of the item magic abilities are probably fair to throw on these kind of skills. I don't know. I don't really have an idea just yet. I've been thinking about it, but I feel like you could just remove the weapon skills entirely and it's fine. But if you want me to use the weapon skills, they need a tweak of some sort. Anyway, I've said enough. Samurai, obviously, very powerful. Definitely one of my favorite classes. No doubt about it. But more mechanically, just with weapons, armor, and base skills than the techniques themselves. Okay, I went on for quite a long time, but I do really like the Samurai. They're in contention with the fighter for top martial, honestly. And if the techniques were just a little bit more useful, they would probably beat the fighter out for top spot, in my opinion. So I don't know if that's something they need, honestly. They're already really good. Okay, next up, Engineer. Okay, so Machinist Engineer. 2% hit growth, 2% magic defense. Stats very much focused on intelligence and relative... Oh, by the way, I didn't mention it, but the Samurai does get more agility and luck than a fighter. Not by a lot, but it does mean they're better at running from combat, and they're a little bit better on evasion and stuff, technically speaking. So you could give them small credit for running away from encounters a little bit easier. It's not a huge difference, but technically they have less strength, but better other stats. Less strength vitality, more balanced overall. Still strength focused. I don't think that really factors in significantly, just something I noticed. The Engineer, on the other hand, is very intelligence and then relatively low balance stats for everything else. That's okay. HP definitely on the low end. Kind of a support. Maybe not the lowest like a Black Mage, but on the low end for sure. But that's fine. Their basic equipment, hammers and guns, and actually pretty good armor selection. Now, because the Engineer can craft, I am going to include the augmenting and forging for his own gear, because, of course, if you have one, you can do that. So, simply by having an Engineer, he is a support class that makes the whole group stronger. Plus 3 damage into all your weapons at the very least, magic defense or absorb into everyone's armor at the very least, without even trying to move around elemental protections and stuff. So, a very supportive job that has, personally, a pretty decent weapon and armor selection. Definitely way better than any other support job. Like, if we're talking white mage, green mage, bard, dancer even, this guy's got way better absorb and armor, better weapons in general. I think the dancer is better for DPS after promotion. Yeah, by a margin. The dual wielding damage is pretty solid. But other than the dancer, the engineer is definitely the highest physical damage support class. For sure. The only thing that's going to beat him out would be the pure marshals, and maybe red. No, he was doing more damage than red mage, even with the master hammer and with the guns for sure. And the red mage had a pretty good sword, so I think he out damages all the mages and support classes in physical attack, which is nice. The guns are kind of unique. They don't get a lot of hits. They're not scaling. They're a little bit like the bows, except they're not limited on one shot only. Different guns have different number of attacks. And because they always crit as long as you hit, even though he's got relatively low damage, they're not bad. They definitely did good damage. Enough that they're not as strong as a fighter in physical combat, but they're not too far off. They're not going to keep up with monks and samurais and dragoons, but for a support class, again, maybe other than the dancer, their damage output is good, and they're the tankiest of all the supports by a long shot. Better armor for sure. So that's already putting him in a very good part. He buffs the group simply by augmenting and crafting some extra gear. I'm not a huge fan of all the crafted gear. I think Mithril and Genji and stuff is like a little bit debatable. I think some of that could use some tweaks, could be a little bit buffed up. Maybe some of the formulas, like, I don't really like that you need to bring an engineer, an archer, and a samurai to craft the samurai sword. I don't like that you need a fighter, a black belt, an engineer to craft the sword chucks. There's a couple combos that require 3 classes just to craft one item. I think that's a little bit too tuned. I don't think that's necessary. I think the power on the Genji armor was a bit on the low end for late game armor, for ultimate gear. Like expensive, complicated crafting that takes a lot of work and isn't actually as good as the stuff you find out in the wild for free. Not quite what I'm hoping. Maybe I'm missing some context, but most of the Genji armor didn't impress me, and the Mithril armor didn't impress me too. There was some of them was better than others, let's just say. But a lot of them were maybe underpowered. A little bit hit or miss. Obviously, there's a couple crafts that were incredibly good for promotion stuff, like the Master Hammer was incredibly good. The Enhancer Sword seems pretty darn powerful for if anyone can take advantage of it. There's probably some of those weapons that are better than others by a fair margin. So definitely a plus for the engineer that he can unlock some pretty cool gear. Even if the pre-promotion stuff is a bit... It's too expensive. You spend a lot of gold and a lot of time to get a side upgrade rather than an upgrade, like a side grade. The Mithril stuff is... It's good, but I think it's too much filling around for how good it is. You could skip it and not really miss out on much. Just throw some Earth Absorb into all your basic iron armors and silver armors, and whatever else you've got, and you're fine. Messing around with the Mithril, I think it's cost too much money and not really... You don't really get paid back for it enough. So it's kind of a very complicated system. Again, credit to the coder, the programmer, the developer. I expect he spent a tremendous amount of energy on it. I just think it's tuned a little bit on the weak side. It may be easy enough to power up just the stats, like a little bit more damage, hit rate, defense on the Mithril tier gear, so it's clearly tied or better than any pre-promoted equipment. Anything that you can equip pre-promotion, the expensive, difficult-to-craft Mithril stuff that you have to go all the way without an airship, back to Dwarf Cave, extra trips, like, it absolutely, because it's so much of a pain to build, should be better than any random pre-promotion weapon and armor you can equip for any of the classes. In my opinion. Again, my opinion. But if you're going to go through all the extra hoops to do it, it should be better. Without it, there should be no, like, is it better or is it actually worth, like, doing the math, trying to justify the cost and the effort? If you're spending all this time and money, it should definitely be better. You shouldn't have to think about it. And then having it be... I like the idea of the crafted armor and weapons having lots of augment slots so that you can throw in different elemental effects for defense and resistances, or different, like I've talked a little bit about weapon families being a little bit weak, but as a system, moving crystals around and stuff, that's all a lot of fun. So I definitely like the augment system. I think I said before lots, I think the augmenting maybe shouldn't be locked to the dwarf anvil. I think either towns or just anywhere or certain locations in dungeons, you should be able to augment stuff. It's not that valuable, but if you pick up some new armor, just disassemble it and move the crystal to something else. That's fine. As long as our inventory is limited to 4 per person, you can't carry extra stuff around. So either more inventory slots with the engineer to carry junk around, or just a backpack that you can hold 10 more armor or something. I don't know. I mean, it's funny now. We have literally 3 pages of items. We've got so much junk we carry around via the new system, but we're still limited to only 16 armors max. You know, it's kind of like, it's kind of frustrating, given how cool the crafting system is, that you can't just move the armor around a little easier. And I understand, like, mechanically wise, you don't want to have more than 4 armor in terms of equipment slots. You don't want to be able to equip 5 or 6 things. That's going to change the balance a bit. If you can equip the boots, the shield, the helmet, the armor, the whatever I missed, the gloves, like, adding more space to equip more stuff will change the balance. And even just being able to access it in battle as item magic would also throw off the balance. So I don't want that. I just mean in the menu for carrying capacity, I kind of think, especially when we're leaning into more crafting and just as you add more classes and more weapons and armor into the game, we're very much limited by the inventory space. And obviously, Final Fantasy ditched the limited inventory system very quickly. So Renaissance maybe could do something like that, some sort of compromise for inventory. That would help the engineer a lot in just ease of use, quality of life. But that's a minor critique. Overall, I think the crafting is fine. I wish you could augment anywhere, and I wish some of the recipes were a little better in terms of crafting. Altogether, moving crystals and ores around, totally fine. I think farming some of the ores was a bit of a pain. Deconstructing in the early game was a bit of a pain. It's not like deal breaker, but it's a lot of hassle. And if you want me to go through that hassle, I need to have a good upgrade out of it. And I don't feel like I always got the good upgrade. I think the easy system is just throw some ores and crystals in the stuff you have already and just ignore the crafting, well, except for a couple specific things that are worth it. Which is kind of unfortunate, right? Because that's skipping, just like the techniques on the samurai, it's skipping a lot of the point of the new classes. It's kind of, to me, almost disrespectful of the time the developer put into these complicated jobs. And I don't want to just ignore an entire system that clearly matters a lot and it's important, and you know, someone's put a lot of energy into it. So I'm thinking more how to make it worth it rather than just skip it entirely, because you could just skip it, it's fine. But you know, that's kind of the lame answer, right? The boring answer. So altogether, crafting and stuff, I say is good. It just maybe needs a little bit of tweaking, and that's maybe something that's not too hard to do. Other than that, let's look at some skills. They don't actually have combat skills. You get deconstruct from the beginning, which is fine. Again, with inventory management, I did not like having to buy 8 cloth armors to deconstruct them one at a time from the menu like this over and over again. I think it's too clunky. I don't see the value in it. So I think there's got to be a way to streamline that so you're not clicking his button as much. Like, I know eventually you can just buy cloth for 100 gold. I don't know if it matters that much that you couldn't just buy it from the beginning for maybe a bit less. Like, the gold cost, one of the things I'll say overall is I think the overall gold sink on the engineer is too high. It requires too much grinding to get enough gold to craft the stuff you want to craft. And at that point, your level is so high that it doesn't even matter anymore, right? So if you want to use this stuff at a normal level without extra grinding, the cost maybe should be toned down a little bit, in my opinion. Anyway, nothing particularly wrong with deconstruct. I think it's just a bit fiddly. And then once you're promoted, you get redesign, and that's pretty cool. But I'll talk about the tools at the end again, kind of like the samurai weapon techniques. In terms of traits, this doesn't really matter. This is just his core ability to make tools. Salvager just means you get drops of ores from certain encounters. This is if you're going to do special drops from enemies based on your party, this is how to do it. I think this system needs to be backdated to the archer, so that if anybody kills an enemy with an archer in the group, you get the drops for the arrow utility. If we're going to do arrow crafting as well, give it the same mechanic. Make it consistent, and this is definitely the better of the two options, in my opinion. I still have some critiques. You definitely want to make sure all the ores are available in a relatively farmable method that's not too complicated. I think air did not have a grind tile, and bolt was a bit too late in the game to be super relevant, but most of them are pretty easy to get. I had more than I needed of almost everything, and fire and stuff was pretty easy to farm if I needed a little bit extra. But this is definitely the right idea, other than some minor drop rate tweaks. And I think if the archer had a system like this, I would have been a little bit less critical on the crafting arrow system. So good. A thumbs up for me. This is not that complicated of a system, because anybody can kill via any method and you get the drop. That's much more efficient. Blacksmith anvil. I think definitely should be one or two more anvils. I'm not sure how many I think would be fair. It does make sense, obviously, that the dwarf cave is where you forge. I think there should be a couple more. Just especially before you get the airship, because the backtracking is not really fun, you know. Maybe Crescent Lake has one, Dwarf Cave has one, maybe there's one in the Earth Cave somewhere, or maybe there's one in the volcano somewhere or something. I don't know. Once you've got the airship, it doesn't really matter, but until then, I would like this to be a little bit less transit. And I don't think it's that hard to just add an anvil somewhere. That's probably not a big deal. And then sure, the bonus to hammer damage, that's nice. If you're going to do hammer damage, that makes the hammers better. That does mean that your best hammer is technically a 45 base damage weapon. 45-30 is pretty close to Excalibur without the effectiveness, right? So that's one of the reasons why he's so strong, just in general. Like, that's a pretty solid... At level 32, that's, what, 4 attacks at, you know, around 60 damage a hit? That's good. That's real good. No doubt. That's maybe equivalent to a ninja, actually. Really, because ninjas get 2% growth. Samurai is way stronger than a ninja with a katana because of the 3% growth. Yeah, no, that's good. So, nice little... It gives him a bit of a niche. He's the only person that can use guns. He's got the best hammer usage. Although the default hammers are a bit too weak, but you got a couple custom hammers for him. That's good, right? His limit, it's kind of more of a meme, I think. I did not find any of the attacks to be particularly effective. It's a little side quest to unlock them. Drink is basically worthless. Heal Force is okay, but it is a limit, so you get to use it once. And it's hard to imagine when this would really make a difference, but, you know, it's kind of cool. I think, as usual, limits need to be better for me to want to use them. Because most of the time, I think his attack with a hammer is better than his missile attack, right? I think his base damage is high enough that the Magitech stuff is probably not better. And once we talk about tools, you lose the tools when you're in limit, right? That's kind of a downgrade in some ways. Mostly it gives him some spare HP if you can't heal him up. Other than that, I don't know what else to do with it. Okay, so now, the hard part. Crafting, complicated, maybe too complicated, but overall positive. The tools... Oh, man. Early game, they were basically useless. So, before promotion, you only get the standard base tool. Auto crossbow is only good against imps and goblins. It does eventually get 2 attacks, eventually. And then it's a little bit, I think at like level 10 or 11 it gets double attack. But the base 10 damage is not enough to pierce any amount of absorb, really. And if you're fighting enemies with 0 absorb, this will be okay. But if you're fighting enemies with 10 absorb, it basically does 1 to 10 damage per hit, and that's not enough. I mean, crits might help, but it's pretty weak consistently all through the early game. And in the late game, even the repeater, which is stronger, didn't... It was improved. One of the things to keep in mind, it's hard for balance purposes. The Master Hammer does significantly boost tool use. But you shouldn't necessarily assume you always have it equipped. Maybe you want to do a gun build. Maybe you want to equip something else. I don't know why, but maybe you couldn't afford to build it for some reason, right? It is promotion locked at least, so you have to think of this as a promotion upgrade. In the pre-promotion form, I'll start with pre-promote, basically. The basic tools are pretty bad, mostly pre-promotion, when you cannot customize them and you're not boosting them by the Master Hammer. The basic auto crossbow is mostly not good. Darkness is bad, unless you have a Dark Knight, but mostly useless. Poison damage is one of the better ones, but think of the early game, you're fighting a lot of things resistant to poison. I mean, it's better than nothing. Of the first three, it's the best, but not crazy or anything. And the bio status might as well be nothing. The fourth one was, I think, the Devulcanator. It's hard for me to assess how good this is. Very niche. It requires someone else probably to, or the Debilitator. Yeah, this is hard to judge. I consider it very low priority because you're not dealing damage or disabling, but you're setting up someone else for a little bit bonus damage. And potentially an insta-kill, right? Like, if you give them, assumedly... I don't know if you can give them, like, status weakness. Status is officially an element. I didn't use it enough to see that, but, like, I saw Fire, Ice, Lightning. Maybe that's what Elemental means, but... I think I saw Holy and Earth and stuff. Theoretically, if you could give them Death weakness or Status weakness, it would open them up to some nasty combos. And combos are cool. And especially on New Game Plus with more HP and stuff, I could see this being neat. But not, again, in pre-promotion terms, not often very useful. The drill, I think, is pretty weak. Again, it's not much stronger than an auto crossbow, and it's single target. It does ignore defense, at least, so it doesn't have the same problem, but it's single target, and the damage didn't really impress me most of the time. I mean, it wasn't nothing, but we were doing like 100 damage when a Silver Sword Fighter was doing 150, 200. Like, you know, it's okay. The Noise Blaster was the first good one. Non-elemental confusion to all targets. That's the first really good tool. But that's... I can't remember which one that was. Was that... I can kind of backlog it. That was the 6th one? When did we get that? It was... Was that Ice Cave? I think it was Ice Cave. So you have to go into one of the worst... Probably the worst dungeon in the game to get the first really good tool. So that's a bit harsh. I mean, it's a fair reward for doing a terrible dungeon. But once you get this, you've got a pretty good utility use. Even if you did nothing else with tools, confusing everything, or most things on turn 1 is pretty solid. The Summoner had a Kate Sith, which was non-elemental confusion, very similar, and it was pretty solid. That was, on its own, basically enough to salvage the Evoker into being not completely useless. And it's basically the same thing, you just get it a little later. So that's cool. The Buzzsaw was... Was that in the Waterfall? I think that was the Waterfall. And then the Warmech was killing Warmech. The Buzzsaw, I think... Or at least the default saw. I think you're always going to be promoted when you get these ones. Because you need the airship. Well, you're not necessarily promoted, but you might as well be. Because you can only get it after airship. The insta-death stuff never impresses me. 20% doesn't matter. But the damage is, you know, better, maybe better than the drill by a little bit. It doesn't ignore armor. Unblockable means, I think, it can't be evaded, maybe? So it always hits. But it does not mean it ignores defense. So high defense enemies are still going to reduce it significantly. Crits are good. The insta-death is neat, but it's not the kind of thing... I'm not going to rely on a 1 in 5 chance for insta-death. But yeah, it's okay. And then finally, the War Mech, you're not going to get this until basically you're done the game anyway. Hard to evaluate that one because it's so late. So the problem isn't that most of those unpromoted skills, the first round of them, most of them are pretty weak. Weak, either useless, weak, or mid until you get to the Noise Blaster. And then it's solid. And of the vanilla ones, they're all kind of okay, but they're mostly not very powerful. So for those initial tools, the fact that they're consumable is actually a travesty, because they're not very strong. They're not game breakers at all. They're nothing compared to some of the other jobs' abilities, the attacks, the support, the spells. A turn 1 Bane from the Red Mage, a fighter that just deletes something, the Time Mage that just breaks the game entirely. Like, the good classes have way, way more powerful base abilities than the unpromoted machinist tools. And the fact that you have to craft them, it's a constant drain on your money and time. It's not terribly expensive in terms of gold. I think I calculated a crossbow was like 50 gold per use-ish. And I think most of them, it's probably like 50, 100, 150, 200, 300, 500, 1,000, 5,000, or something like that. It's not the biggest gold drain. The crafting system was way more expensive. But it is a gold drain. And it's the fact that you have to deconstruct and craft and continuously cycle through it. It's a big time waster. So it might be better to ignore most of them, or nearly all of them, until you're promoted, other than a couple very niche cases, which is unfortunate. I think I really think the consumable thing needs a rethink. I have a couple ideas. Either drop it entirely, build one, and then you've got it forever, or build as many as you want to use in a row. But realistically, I was never in a situation in this playthrough where I could not build an arbitrarily large number of any tool I wanted. If I felt like going through the steps to deconstruct and purchase materials, I could build as many crossbows as I wanted. So I could use it every single turn for the entire game if I wanted. It was never limited by money or rare resources. So if that's the design, that they're weak enough that you can just use them every turn, that's also how they were in FF6, technically. They weren't even weak, but you could just use them forever. I kind of think they should just be, you build them once and you got them forever. Mostly. There's some caveats in the promotion, but pre-promote, they're nowhere near strong enough that they should be consumable. In my opinion. I think the pre-promote tools, for sure, build them once, forget about them. In fact, that might be the main distinction between the standard ones and the should-be-stronger promotion-locked variants. So let's talk about the variants. Now, I will assume, for the most part, once you're promoted, you've also got the boost. This means they're all better, and that's great. They need it. They need... from what I've read, the tool potency is like 50% damage or power for spells, plus 50% is pretty good, and the hit percent or spell accuracy is doubled, I think. That is a very significant power-up. Like, it's good. So, I will assume, for the most part, you can build this as soon as you're promoted. It's pretty late into the game. I'm fairly confident that's not a problem. Unless you're playing New Game Plus, but that's completely different. We're not talking New Game Plus. I haven't even done a New Game Plus run with these guys, so no reason to think about that. So, how do I evaluate these post-promotion? Well, the basic ones are still a bit weak. I still think the core auto crossbow should be permanent. I might allow that the variants have some kind of consumable charge. I don't love the crafting and deconstructing, but once you're promoted and you can fly, if there's a shop, which there is, that can sell you all the stuff, it's entirely just a gold sink. There's no deconstructing, there's no rare item farming. You just go to a shop and you buy as much as you want. So, I'm a little bit more reasonable with the variants for the promotion ones being not permanent. Maybe. I still think it's probably not the best design decision. because it just means I don't want to use them much because I have to spend the menu time crafting them, and if I ever run out of stuff, I gotta go all the way back to on rack and buy it again, right? Like that, it's a blocker for me to want to use them and test them out. And now, just as I will go through these again just to give my final impression. They are definitely better with the Master Hammer equipped, with better scaling, and the variants in general add some... I like the variants. I like the system of customizing them. I actually think it might be better if it was permanent, because the flexibility of changing them mid-dungeon is cool, but I don't want to have to spend that much time in the menu. I actually think, as much as it's a limitation, I think if you buff them by saying they're permanent, but then saying you have to pick one, you can keep it if you want, or you pick one of these three and it's just, that is it now. It's been upgraded, that's what you get for this run. I might actually think that's a simpler, more elegant design. You don't have to keep recrafting them. You can still customize them for whatever party build you're looking for, kind of like when you're buying spells. Remember, most spell levels have 4 spells. You can only pick 3, or if you're a red mage, even fewer. You've got up to 8 spells you can only pick 3 out of. This could be a similar system where each level of 8 levels of tools, you can pick 1 to upgrade, and then it's just, that's locked in. I actually think that would be a nerf that would offset the buff of not having to craft them continuously. And I actually think that'd be pretty happy with it. Some of these specifics might need to be a little stronger, because the balance isn't always available. But that's maybe my preference at the moment from my current experience. But just to go over some of these, this video's going on a little long already. I think focus crossbow is bad. If you want to do single target, it needs to do way more damage. This is not even as good as your hammer. So if you've got the hammer, that's 30 damage, well, 45 damage, 30 hit, and whatever the crit is. This is literally worse than the hammer you get when you get promoted. And it's worse than most weapons you could equip. So it needs to be better than the weapon, or have something else. Otherwise, if it's not as good as a regular weapon or a gun, why would you ever use it? So bad. This is more of a straight upgrade. I don't think there's any downside to this. I think it costs more. So sure, it should have an expense to build it if you want to upgrade it to do more AoE damage. I think this one is close to balanced. As long as you have the hammer equipped. I could see upping the damage to I think maybe even the crossbow should be 15 damage, and the single target one should be 40, and then the repeater should be 20 or something, a little bit better, and something like that. I don't know. It's close. This one's nearly okay. It is very bad against armor, and maybe that's fine to have an AoE that's good against unarmored foes. That's okay. It's only a level 1 tool. The medic crossbow, it's pretty weak. Again, if you didn't have to spend heal potions to build it, to rebuild it over and over again, this might be fine. If you're going to make it consumable, it should be at least twice as powerful. Right now, it's basically a heal staff, and you have to build it over and over again. So I think if it was a heal 2 staff, maybe that would justify the cost. But honestly, it should probably just be better and not consumable. And then you'd have think of the white mage. They can do the prey skill every turn. I maybe wouldn't want it to be quite as strong as prey, but it could be close. This is not that different of a skill. And remember, the engineer is a support class. It's okay to spend a turn just doing a little bit of chip healing for the group. It's not going to make a huge difference against a boss, but if you're not killing an enemy with your hammer, I still think most of the time you're still going to attack and kill something, or use your gun to kill something. This is just a small amount of healing you could just do every round, just like using a heal staff, and it should just be free. I don't think that's a problem. If that's the choice, you don't want to have the AoE damage. If you're going by the pick 1 permanent upgrade system that I'm kind of thinking, make it a little bit better, and that'd be fine. Darkness. Oof. Darkness is such a bad status effect. This whole tool needs a bit of a power-up. The blink one is good. No problem there. 100%. It is solid. The fire one is probably okay as well. I didn't test it out, but fire 2 approximate damage is fine for a level 2 sort of skill. Again, it's promotion only, and assuming you've got the hammer equipped, that means it's actually a 90 power, which is pretty close to fire 3. Not quite, but it's getting closer to fire 3. So that's an option, right? You could have an offensive fire or a defensive blink. That's a fair choice. However, the darkness, like, it basically is only good if you have a Dark Knight. Darkness, I think the darkness status needs to be buffed. It needs to give a larger hit and evade penalty on application. That's the main thing for darkness. And then this would be okay. But as it is, it's not a big enough difference to really matter. But that's okay. Those would be like a stat. In terms of design, a status effect, a defensive buff, or a damage effect. All very good, and that would line up with my tailoring your tools for your party composition idea, rather than just being able to change them every fight. Because I don't actually think you should be able to change them between every single battle. It's cool, but that's too much. It's too many decisions. It's analysis paralysis time. Okay, that's what was next. Right. This one's hard. It's really hard for me to analyze this one because it doesn't scale. It's very specifically niche. I think I'm okay with it existing at about this one. It shouldn't be consumable. This one, of all of them, it's so niche situationally to spend a turn to do nothing to set someone else up. 100%, no doubt in my mind, this is a prime example of just let it be a permanent reusable thing. It's not even that strong, I don't think. It does mean, in theory, you could use this every battle, and then your Mage Staff and your Thor's Hammer do 50% more damage. Or you could have your own Thor's Hammer and do another 100% damage. The odds of this being better than just attacking with the hammer itself is tiny in general usage. It does give you a way to boost like a Black Mage to crazy, like giving enemies weaknesses to, say, Ice. Casting Ice 3 with all that Elemental Seal boost on a Black Mage could look pretty cool. And if you had like other elements and stuff, like, I like the idea of giving different elemental weaknesses, but it maybe even should have priority, honestly. If you made sure this happened before your ally had their turn, that would be helpful. I think it's a bit too weak. I think at least priority would make it... The combo would work on the turn 1, which is what I want. I don't want my mage to cast fire to kill half the enemies, then I do Vulcanator, give them weakness to fire, then my fighter kills another one, and then on round 2, I try to cast fire 2 again to take advantage of the weakness, but everything's dead by the time we cast it. Like, that's what I'm trying to avoid, and I think at the moment, that's mostly what's going to happen. On the other hand, I haven't tested this out, maybe you can leave a comment. If the weakness undoes a resistance, then it's already very good. But I don't think that happens. If it does downgrade even a resistance to a normal or a resistance to a weakness, like a full swap, either of those would help a fair bit. It's not even that strong, but it would definitely help. A little bit dangerous with Earth, because you can make anything susceptible to crack. But only the Black Mage gets Quake. The Red Mage can't even learn it. So Blue Mage has Crack, and Black Mage has Quake, and they're mostly garbage. So it would just be a way to synergize with a couple specific classes that rarely get any value out of Earth. That would be fine. That's not that broken, I don't think. And this is post-promotion. We're already promoted anyway, right? Like, that's okay. Keep that in mind. The promotion ones can be overpowered because the party is very overpowered by the time you get those. Noise, Saw, and then the mech. Okay. Menus. Right, so the Noise Blaster, I think, probably the strongest vanilla one. And with the hammer, the accuracy does go up, so it's more and more likely to hit Confuse. I think the Alarm variant is mostly a downgrade. I think on New Game Plus, it's better because the enemies get double damage. I could see this being an option against the Kraken and Carry and anything that punches really hard and doesn't use a lot of magic and can be confused. Some things are immune to confuse, but most of the vanilla bosses, this would work, I think, pretty well. And dealing double damage to himself is kind of insane. But yeah, I think the main benefit is disabling all the enemies so they don't attack the party. That's why I like it. Even if it doesn't last very long, this is still a good use of your turn. This is less good against random encounters, but better against bosses, so that's a choice. I could see permanently upgrading it to be better against bosses, because someone else can do the crowd control. Or keeping it at crowd control and having someone else focus on debuffing bosses or something. Like, that's a fair choice if it was permanent. I think this one's garbage. It needs to be way better. Sleep doesn't matter. People wake up from sleep immediately, especially if they take a physical hit. So by the time you use Megaphone, everyone's probably going to be awake anyway. And if you're asleep, this doesn't work. Maybe if you have this, you should be immune to sleep. That might help it a little bit. At least if you choose to build a Megaphone, you just are naturally immune to it. Or if you use it in the battle, your party is immune to sleep for the battle. Maybe, like, sleep is pretty niche anyway, doesn't come up very often. But if you're trying to build something around audio protection, recovering from the condition is not what you want. You want to avoid the condition. And the fatigue is pretty niche as well. There's probably some builds with some classes where that's better. I'm okay with that being included, but the sleep effect is not enough. So I think this needs a bit of a buff one way or the other. Priority, again, would help if it went first in battle. And silence, I think, is pretty niche. Again, it's probably worse than confusion, but there are a couple bosses where silence is ideal. And non-elemental silence is pretty sweet. So I think I'm okay with, like, Noise Blaster is great, but Alarm is maybe okay less of the time, and Sonic is even less, but I could see just being given the option, pick one, and make it good. And this needs to be powered up a little bit to be a viable candidate, but I think I would normally just keep Confuse All. Mostly. But if you had, let's say you had an Evoker on your party that has Kate Sith, then you've got two people with the same effect, you don't need it. Maybe then you take Silence or the cleanse, you know, something like that would make sense. Buzzsaw! Promotion! Well, I quite enjoyed the Buzzsaw. The 4 attacks was pretty sweet, and it did do... I think it is affected by damage, or by armor, so on New Game Plus... Well, no, they don't get extra armor, but anything with high absorb, unfortunately, it's kind of garbage. But it does hit AoE, it hits 4 targets randomly, which is fun. Or the same target 4 times, which is pretty sweet. Good crit rate. Yeah, I think this is reasonably strong enough. Maybe should scale a little bit more. I'm not sure. But if you've got the Master Hammer equipped, it's probably solid. And you should probably have it once you access this. 50% chance to kill, as long as you're not immune to death element or KO status. I don't know. I'd rather it was a higher accuracy. It's like single target, right? Yeah, no, I think that's not good enough. It's not really a consideration. I mean... No. I would almost never gamble on a 50% to kill one enemy. I guess some bosses... it would work on all the bosses except Lich and Chaos, I think. Because the only bosses with death elemental protection are the Lich as an undead and Chaos immune to everything. Warmech might be. But I think Carrie, Kraken, and Tiamat could be killed. So do you want a 50% chance per turn to kill Tiamat? I mean, that's probably more accurate than Bane, I guess. Unless you're a Saboteur Red Wizard with an Enhancer. But it's still pretty weak. I just don't like... For me, it's hard. I don't like these kind of effects very often. But maybe that's a viable choice for some people, just having a insta-kill rather than a damage. I will always take the damage. And then unblockable... Oh, right, this one's just bad. No, this one needs to be like, you deal double the damage you take as recoil or something. You need to do... Because enemies have more hit points than you, and your hit points are more valuable than the enemy's hit points, because you have to recover yours via resources. The enemies just respawn infinitely. So... if you're going to take damage, you need to be getting some value out of it. And this needs to do more damage than these by a significant margin before I'm going to take half my HP as damage. That's really bad. It also puts you at the opportunity cost where you're lower HP. It's more likely that a small enemy attack kills you, and then you're in really bad shape. So not only does it need to do better damage than the equivalent options, and your physical attack, it needs to pay off the risk of you killing yourself or putting yourself into a state where you get killed. Literally double, triple, or quadruple the damage dealt to you is probably what you need to do for this to be fair. And exactly the same amount, not even close. Sure, unblockable, but no, it needs to be way stronger. Or it's just a joke. If it's meant to be a joke, whatever. But yeah, that's pretty bad. Finally, the war mechs. I did test these guys out a little bit. They're really expensive to build. The fact that they're consumable is dumb. I do think perhaps for this one, unlike the others, it does practically make sense where if your war mech dies during combat, you have to rebuild it. So I'm okay with rebuilding them if they are killed. But if they survive the battle, I don't think you should have to rebuild it. It's just not necessary, right? That's kind of goes against the whole point of building a cool mech. You could build 9 and carry them around with you and then deploy them in battle. But as soon as you could carry them around for hours in your backpack, right? This is why we can only hold 4 armor, but you can hold 9. You can hold 36 war mechs if you built 9 of each, right? Plus the materials to build a whole bunch more. But as soon as you use them, they self-destruct. That, I don't think that's appropriate. You know, if they die, then you build a new one. But I think they should be, like my other suggestions, basically permanent. You pick one that you like, and then you've just got it. And maybe if it dies, you build a new one. That's okay for war mech. It is the ultimate one. I could see it being a little bit more expensive. But that said, they're not that good. When I used the normal war mech against regular vampires, it never used nuclear, because of course not, just random chance. And it does some damage, but like, whatever. The defense one does seem to have some amount of taunt, like a larger number of attacks are targeting the blue war mech than my mages, but I would need way more data to prove that. But I like the idea of defense mech, stun mech, nuclear mech, and they all have like an upside and a downside. And just being able to pick, like, which one do you want? And then it's just permanent. I think that would be okay. The downside is it costs a turn to summon it, and it doesn't do anything on the turn you summon it. So you're giving up a turn and a resource for something that oftentimes is doing less damage than your physical attack. So turn 1, you're behind the average. Let's say you're killing 9 enemies, 1 at a time. Turn 1, you did not kill an enemy. Turn 2, you've got a war mech. You kill 1 enemy, the war mech does something randomly. Maybe it's tanking, maybe it uses nuclear, maybe it kills an enemy, maybe it misses an enemy. It also targets randomly, you don't get to control it. But on turn 2, you're probably... Well, you've killed 1 now, and it has maybe killed 1. At best, you have broken even. You're probably still behind on turn 2. Turn 3, you've probably killed 2 now for 2 attacks and 1 summon. And the war mech having had 2 turns, you eventually gain an action economy advantage if the war mech lives long enough and the fight goes on. But it's going to take until rounds 3 and 4 before you really see an advantage to that, I think. And most fights never go on that long. So... honestly, it might need a buff. I'm not sure how I would do it. It is a very late game tool. You only get it after fighting a rare, sort of optional super boss. It's not as... in Renaissance terms, it's not really a super boss. It's no Gilgamesh. Or a summon boss, right? But in the original, it was the hardest, most dangerous random encounter in the map. Single enemy random encounter. There were probably some random ambushes that are worse, but the classic one was war mech shows up on that Bridge of Destiny, ambushes the party, nuclears the group, and then in round 2 nuclears them again, and you're all dead. So it is canonically one of the worst random encounters, I think. Very much, nightmare. You have to kill it, and then craft it. I think it should be pretty awesome, right? Like, it's pretty late game. We're not worried about this thing being overpowered because you only really have it for the final dungeon, right? You can sequence break and do it a little bit earlier, but for the most part, if you're at Tiamat's floor, you're probably killing Tiamat, and at that point, you're basically done everything but the final dungeon, normally, in normal progression. So if you can kill the war mech and Tiamat, you're totally ready to go to Topher, 100%. So it's only going to be viable for one dungeon. I want this thing to be badass. It needs to be better than all the other tools, because it's the last one that you get at the end of the game. And I don't think it's quite strong enough. I'm not sure what I would do for it. I have a feeling it might not be boosted by the hammer. If it's not, it should be. If it is, I missed it. But if it did 50% more damage and 100% more accuracy, like nuclear, the nuclear skill was buffed, and like I feel like when it used those skills and attacks when I was testing it, it was pretty weak, worse than just attacking or doing other stuff. So that's kind of my final thing. The War Mech I think needs a bit of a power up. It's fine. It's such a late game thing. It might as well be overpowered anyway, right? Anyway, I spent a ton of time talking about these two classes. Long episode, of course. I think in terms of ranking, Samurai nearly tied with Fighter for nearly top spot. Somewhere near there anyway, if I had to do a tier list. And the Engineer is definitely in the higher spec as well. These are two powerful new jobs. They are nothing like Spellblades, Summoners, Green Mage. They are way, way better than the bad Renaissance jobs. Even though they have some mechanics I'm not completely sold on, I think the Engineer is in the top 50%, maybe top 25%. It is probably the best support class, which used to be the Dancer, but I think the Dancer dances are great. And as long as you're willing to put up with the frustration, the gold cost, and the frustrating, to me, frustrating, I mean, maybe it's not frustrating to you, but the time-consuming crafting, deconstructing, recrafting, as-is mechanics, the Machinist, is probably a more useful support than the Dancer on average. Because it has more options, more stuff it can do, more armor, guns. You can buff all your allies with like passive armor and weapons and resistances that the Dancer can't even think about. I mean, the Dancer is very, very good at support, but I think the Machinist and Engineer are probably higher ranked than them. So I definitely put them pretty high on my list, and I don't think they need buffs per se. I just think the crafting time consumption is a bit too high. Maybe the gold costs are a bit too high. Some of the forges are a bit weak, but overall, like, I don't think it needs to be drastically improved. It's, that was the main thing when I did my tier list, is which classes are good, which classes maybe need a little bit of power up to kind of keep up with the curve. These two, no problems, really. They're both very strong. Maybe too strong in some aspects. But they're no Time Mage. The Time Mage is definitely the game breaker. If you're comparing these things to game-breaking abilities, nah, they cannot do anything like a Time Mage can. So don't worry about that. They're good, but they're not busted. They're just high tier, I think. Anyway, that's it. That's the series. I'm definitely going to play some more with them. Probably record either a New Game Plus mode with them to see what they're like if you start with their promotion stuff. I might do some solo runs with them. I'll have to think about it. I think it'd be fun. I've had some recommendations already, and I'll get more information on them as I play. But this was the thorough playthrough. This is the one where I really tried to learn how they work. Next time, it'll be much faster, and we're going to just skip the stuff that's garbage and try to test out some new stuff if it interests me, basically. I think the Ronin's probably a lot more straightforward. Just do a solo Ronin. It's probably pretty simple, not too difficult. That's the one I'm more excited for. Solo Engineer, it's got some interesting ideas, but I have to do all the crafting again. I don't really want to do all that right away. I want to take a break from crafting. Anyway, that's all. Hope you guys enjoyed the series. 2.2, you're welcome. I had so many people, Blue, when are you going to do version 2.2? Blue, when are you going to do version 2.2? There's new classes. Well, you're welcome. I did it. It just took a little bit longer than you guys wanted. All right, I'm out. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys have enjoyed. I'll see you next time.